Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of the Ask Blue podcast. We're joined today not only by my colleague Jamie Mitchell.
Welcome
back. Yeah, and also by Dean and Judith from Evoke. Welcome.
Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, you're right. How are you doing?
Yeah, great, thanks.
Good. I'm asking that question like we weren't talking at all before the podcast.
Just walked through the door.
Yeah. It's nice to see you.
Yeah.
And welcome to Blue
I was on the left, yeah.
So, because it's your first time on the podcast, it'd be nice if you do a quick introduction of yourselves, who you are, and then we'll move on to some of the questions. So, Judith, you want to go first?
Yeah, so I'm Judith Doherty, Senior Business Development Manager. I've been at Evoke nearly 2 years. And before that, I've held sales and marketing roles in a number of organizations, but most recently with a big focus on user experience, customer experience. So that's the common thread through to Evoke.
A lot of the
value that we add is around the total experience, not just the hardware, not just the software, but essentially what that looks like from a customer perspective.
Fantastic, thanks. Great that you could join us today. Dean?
Yeah, I'm Dean Ward. I'm one of the co-founders of Evoke. So obviously, I've been Evoke now for just over 20 years. So my background is design. That's kind of how the business started. So back in 2003, 2004, I moved into self-checkout, and the Evoke is today from about 2006 onwards. These days, I'm Chief Product Officer. I say these days because obviously as the business has grown over the years, my roles have changed.
Yeah.
I look after all of our new product developments across the software and the hardware teams of the business.
Fantastic. So, well, thank you both for joining us today. Obviously, we're pretty familiar with you and the company and what you do and everything. But Dean, do you want to start just by, who is Evoke? What do you do as a business? Just for people who perhaps aren't aware of that already.
Yeah, I mean, Evoke's a business. We design and manufacture self-service kiosk products, solutions, services. So we started off predominantly doing sort of hardware manufacture. So that's designing for software companies, ISVs, people who wanted a physical platform for their solution to sell into market, be that self-checkout, self-service. But these days we're a full service business. So that means we do obviously all the design, software engineering, scoping, solution delivery, through to the manufacture, development, installation and support and maintenance. So we offer the full service within that market, and that's across multiple sectors, whether it's hospitality, retail, and other diverse sectors as well, where we sell predominantly through ISVs into those channels, and international as well. So over the years, we're now exporting to about 80 countries. Yeah. So, and we're doing installations, at any one time in sort of 4 or 5 countries, each month. But yeah, so we export about, I'd say, between 60 and 80% of everything that we do goes outside of the UK. Lots to the US, and that's definitely a big growth market for us at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a massive market, and part of the reason, one of the main reasons I wanted to talk to you today, apart from the sheer pleasure of talking to you for the sake of it, but is just how much, as we're seeing within Blue Star, how much the explosion of self-service. We're seeing that, certainly across Europe. We know it's happening a lot in the US as well. For us, it's probably been the fastest growing element of our business. We're traditionally a barcoding and POS company, and certainly self-service for us falls within that POS division that Jamie and I work for. But I think it's been a lot of the growth that we've seen has been related to self-service, whether it's the screens or the printers, the hardware that we do that fits into those self-service solutions that you guys are doing. I mean, it's just been a massive growth area for us, and we know that you're seeing the benefits of that as well. So, starting with McDonald's quite a few years ago, and really increasingly in other places now as well. So, what's your take on what's changing within that market?
I suppose the barrier of entry, the big one, is probably cost. Cost of the technology has come down so much. I mean, when we started working with McDonald's 2014, obviously much higher component costs. Kiosk awareness, ubiquitous, the awareness big in the marketplace. But certainly most of the inquiries that we were getting over the years where I'd like a McDonald's style kiosk in a cinema, I'd like a McDonald's style kiosk in a hotel. So I think from where we were 10, 11, 12 years ago to now, the addressable market is huge. It's opened right up. So but much smaller sort of independent retailers, hospitality businesses can access this technology
I think
now.
what brought it home to me was we had an inquiry a couple of years ago for a fish and chip shop that wanted. I mean, you don't get a smaller, more local business than your local chippy here. So I think that the fact that they were looking for self-service technology because it's so busy that they need that technology to help them take the orders. I think just shows you how ubiquitous this technology is getting. Yeah,
absolutely. And the software in parallel, there's many more players in that space, and some of them are focused more on those sort of independents as well. So absolutely, access to technology for everyone is there now. So it's just a different, much bigger marketplace. Absolutely,
for sure. Yeah,
I think the other big driver of that is customer expectation. And so, where McDonald's led and everyone's used to using that style of kiosk, there's a familiarity with it. And then, that forms an expectation as to, they expect that kind of technology in other environments. So we might discern between enterprise and independence and different scales of operations. But as a customer, you expect that wherever you go.
If I can order a burger like this, why can't I order my fish chips and mushy peas in the same way?
Exactly. And irrespective of if it's hospitality or if it's retail, that is just common to our lives now. So, and it's not just demographic or, a younger demographic specific. I think that is, kind of across all ages and that expectation just exists.
This grandparents have been trained by their children who desperately want a Happy Meal that this is how you use a touch screen, grandma.
And they use it at lightning speed. And,
especially when it's a repeat visit. So a lot of these places people go to, it might be painful the first time they use it, but the next time they visit, whether it's a supermarket, a library, so they're used to the technology. And I suppose going back 10 years ago, people weren't as used to it, but now, as Judith said, it's just expected. My children want to just touch a screen. I mean, so that change in behaviour and kind of what people expect is taking a massive shift as these things have become much more. Sort of
I always remember from it would have been quite a few years ago, probably 7 or 8 years ago. I remember when this technology had taken off, and I remember seeing people. They still have the counter service in this. I can't even remember what quick service restaurant it was, possibly McDonald's. I'm not sure. And there were 3 people waiting to serve people at the counter, and nobody was going to talk to them. But there were people queuing to use the self-service kiosks. Just anything, literally anything. I would rather stand in a queue than interact with a human. Seems to be
It's interesting to see how that's evolved. I mean, if you take the example of McDonald's over time, from when they first started to implement self-service as an ordering tool to now so much more than that. It's gone from just being able to browse a menu and create an order to potentially being advertised or recommended additions, promotions, to even a request to round up to give to charity. And when not in use, potentially used as a digital sign advertising platform. So it's interesting to see in that one customer how that tool has adapted to take on so much more than just the ordering process.
Absolutely. So I think there's no argument that self-service is becoming a lot more popular. The growth is really, really clear. What would you assess as being some of the major factors that are influencing that, some of the macro factors that are causing this to happen?
Labour costs are one of the big drivers, the change in NI as well. So, you've got that pressure from an operational point of view of reducing overhead costs, reducing running costs. So that certainly is something that we've seen, particularly in the States, when I think in California, the hourly rate went above $20 an hour. That was a huge driver in the US market. So you've got those increasing costs, and how can you run your hospitality business, specifically profitably, razor thin margins in that space. So, that is one of the big drivers we're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's happening internationally, isn't it? You say in California, I mean, it varies from state to state in the US what the minimum wage is. I was chatting to somebody actually certainly from the Middle East, I think from Dubai, and they were saying actually it's not the labour costs there. The labour costs are relatively low there, but it's the user experience that's driving. They're still seeing an increase in self-service and self-checkout, but it's the user experience that's
you can see, certainly with the clients that we've worked with over the years, hotels and cinemas where you've got real peak traffic times, whether it's a hotel check-in at 3:00, any hotel, like you've got a desk and you've got, members of staff there, but at that peak period, you're always going to have queues, and that's where the customers are going to be unhappy because they're waiting a long time. They just want to get to their room. They've got kids with them. They've got luggage. They've come off a flight. So I see absolutely the experience, even so in sort of QSR and food and beverage, where you might have children with you and you just kind of want to order and go and sit down. Queuing with children is not the funnest thing to do. So yeah, customer experience is still a huge factor.
Queuing without children is a
it's not great. So I think anywhere where you can reduce queuing time, reduce queuing times and getting that peak flow of traffic through and serving them and potentially upselling them as well. So in the case of cinemas, by putting in self-service kiosks and adding friction to the journey means that people can get served faster, they've got more time to browse, and they're more likely to spend money on food or something that's actually going to drive better margins.
The illusion of progress.
There's both a benefit to the customer, but there's also a benefit to the business as well. Yeah. So you are diverting those queues and splitting them so people get served faster and are happier. But on the flip side, they're going to spend more money.
Yeah.
So it's it's win-win in some cases by putting these things in. It's not just a case of, winning on one side. You're also improving your sort of bottom line.
Yeah. I think one of the things that was interesting about when we were chatting before, just about how it's not all or nothing. It's either self-service or nothing. It's the fact that you can have a combination of those factors in there. Yeah. I think that's a really good point. I mean, Jamie, you've been over to the NRF show. I won't point out how recently what that was now tidy as a result of it, but it's what was going on over there, because that's the great barometer of what's happening within technology. What's what kind of things were you seeing related to self-service coming out of that?
So it's quite apt that Evoke here, and we've been speaking about McDonald's as an example of the early generation of that, because ultimately my first memory of that was the larger screen, which was a benefit from a restaurant perspective because it's a big menu. It minimizes the need to scroll between menus to get as much information on screen. One of the things I'd noticed in terms of what was being shown was that there was a lot more compact options. So actually reducing the screen size down, I was seeing a lot between sort of 10 and 22, potentially with the ability to, rather than an enclosed screen, a mounted one that could be then moved to for various reasons, whether it's moving from refreshing your technology to an actual want to move up and down in screen size. That option was there, whereas potentially in the past it wasn't. That was a real trend. The other thing was things like integrated payment. So we were seeing a lot more solutions whereby they're actually reducing the need for bolt-on payment devices, potentially readying themselves for territories that have certified PIN on glass technology. The real standout for me, however, was on the retail side, whereas previously, even at NRF in other years, there had been a lot of providers showing fully functional retail self-checkout with things like integrated baggage scales, security, weight cells, potentially larger status lights. We're moving more in that direction of that sort of modular solution we've just sort of associated with hospitality, and actually getting around that with things like the integration of AI-enabled cameras for age verification rather than using weight cells. So it's interesting to see that move to that more modular system and actually compacting down. From what I've seen, seems to be applicable not just for hospitality but for retail as well.
So it's more modular, more mobile, and also trusting people a little bit more, but still keeping an eye on them just in case. Yeah?
But that's just retail and hospitality. Yeah. I mean, there were providers there that were actually advertising similar technologies to be used in different sub-verticals, and we were seeing quite a lot more outdoor as well, which for me as a consumer in the UK, it's still a new concept. We know it's coming. There are certain instances of using that in my day-to-day. I've used things like e-vending, but actually it's interesting to see how it seems in the future we'll see more and more of this technology implemented outside the four walls as well.
I think that's true. Seems to be true in other countries. The outdoor self-service or vending or whatever. Is that something you guys have seen much of?
Yeah, well, we do a lot of outdoor, certainly within parking. We've definitely seen an increase in inquiries around EV charging. And I think that's driven, obviously, people coming to service stations and basically sitting in their cars for an hour. So is there an opportunity to sell to them from the forecourt, and the forecourts now are much more mature in their offering, aren't they, in kind of what you can buy in some of these, sort of whether it's one of the supermarkets or as the Sainsbury's, whereby you can almost do a shop in some of them. So I think there's an opportunity there within outdoor. We are speaking more to food brands where they're looking to sell outdoor potentially. So we are seeing an increase for sure, not just through sort of drive-through machines, but externally, sort of caravan parks and those kind of places, aren't we?
Park operators, where they've got a number of branded food outlets there, and they want to be able to have a self-service solution where you're able to order from the Papa John's as well as the
ordering all in one place without having 3 kiosks in each one.
The menus are served from that one kiosk.
Yeah, so where you've kind of got a customer walking, the foot traffic is going by, you're kind of almost trying to work on the impulse by, attracting customers. And I think that's one of the key things with kiosks and why the first ones were so large. It's a call to action, isn't it? But I think now they're kind of proven, becoming more compact is fine.
I think as well, we're certainly seeing a big rise in digital signage solutions as well. So rather than have your kiosk also being signage, the kiosk is a kiosk and the signage screens are elsewhere around the venue instead, or as well. So I think that's certainly something that whereas before I think you needed to not only advertise that on a big screen that this is the kiosk, this is where you place your order. Yeah. People know that now, you don't need to do that anymore. But also you're perhaps running advertisements on the screen saying, here's the latest burger or here's a special offer. That's done separately around that, so people go straight into the kiosk and they're there to do one job, which is to order food and lots of it.
It's kind of like what Dean was saying there in terms of as this has become more and more expected. I was Judith that used the word originally in terms of expectations. It's about utilising that real estate well. So actually, if you can have something double up as a menu board, if you can have, for example, dual-sided to get as much ordering potential out of the smallest possible footprint, then it's wise to do so.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in terms of self-service. There's a lot of this technology being deployed, as we've already said. Where does this leave the humans? What are we supposed to do if we work in hospitality? What are we left to do as a job?
I mean, I think a good example of that is, people who perhaps weren't necessarily first movers when it came to self-service technology, because the experience, so, take a coffee shop, the experience of speaking with a barista, having that barista make that drink, them serve it to you, and you've got your name written on the cup. It's all very, human to human. But even those environments where they weren't first movers, I think they're understanding the value of offering that choice. Yeah. So it doesn't have to be you either have self-service or you don't. It's part of the overall experience. If you choose to, it's there. And then within that journey, you can integrate loyalty. You can get someone to kind of input their name as part of that ordering journey. So they still get that drink given to Dean and Richard and Jamie. So you've still got that kind of engagement, but it's just at the later stage of the order rather than the upfront ordering. So I think there are ways that when the customer experience is still really important to the brand, you can still deliver on that. And self-service is a way of being able to queue bust. It still achieves those operational efficiencies, but it doesn't have to be binary. It's not either this or that. It's what works for that brand. And I think that's when we add a lot of value, because understanding the brand, understanding what they want that experience to be, and how self-service can support that rather than flying the face in.
Yeah, I mean, I know I want a coffee and I want it quickly, but I might want to have a nice chat with somebody, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a transactional chat about I want this coffee, this is my name, I'll be down there, get it to me as quickly as possible. the machine takes part of the conversation, and they can still complain about the weather or whatever we talk about.
And there's still lots of skilled jobs that are needed, whether it's preparing food, cooking food, barista, like making coffees that are needed for. So clearing tables is a key one. What kiosks enabled McDonald's to do is actually utilize staff to be doing other things within hotels. What we're seeing, instead of that member of staff who's always on hand, they can support 10 people checking in as opposed to just one-on-one. So they can be helping out. They can be doing, and then during the day they can be doing other things within the hotel as well. So it's just redeployment, but still being customer facing. In most instances. So I think there's still that human interaction. You're just taking away probably what is the most mundane of tasks, whether it's a librarian. They've got archiving and all these other jobs that they're trained to do. Checking the book out is not necessarily, the most skilled one of all their roles.
That they dreamed of in their life in books.
Yeah, exactly. But going out and helping people choose books and telling them about authors and stuff and all that kind of interaction still happening, whether it's on a shop floor, whether it's on a hotel lobby. So there's still that, but the actual transaction piece can be done by technology to enable people to be served faster.
And you're potentially reducing some of the friction. So one of the reasons that people might prefer or choose to use self-service technology, we know there's greater order accuracy. So,
Absolutely.
That point at which you give someone an order and the order's not kind of presented in the way that you had verbally ordered it, we know there's greater order accuracy. So, some of those points at which you might have an encounter and there is an opportunity for friction. You just
remember to ask the right questions as well. You might forget to say, what size drink do you want? What do you want any of these extra flavorings? Do you want an extra shot or whatever it is? The human's going to forget that, especially if at the same time they're interacting and having a complicated conversation about the weather forecast with somebody. They're liable to forget some of the important questions like, do you want decaf?
And from an upsell point of view, I think, maybe as British people, we're a little bit reticent sometimes to kind of do those upsells and do it consistently. And so, when you are being prompted to ask those questions, you might be a little bit self-conscious about it. Whereas, again, we know the increase in average order value because of self-service technology, that's being done as part of a really seamless journey. Yeah. And it doesn't require that person to feel like they're promoting the deal of the day.
Or you're being judged
on the size of your...
I feel like the machine is judging me.
Do you?
Okay. I'm judged on many levels.
Maybe with AI these days and the growth of that, you just start to get some response. But
that increase in business point is really, really key. So we're talking about where does it lead for humans, but theoretically the humans might become more busy because of the increase in order throughput. If I think, for example, if I was traveling internationally in a country where potentially I don't speak the language and going into a restaurant where I don't, for example, it's a deli bar and it's a specific journey you have to go through to build up a sandwich and I'm unfamiliar with it, I'll feel more empowered and able to go and take the order in my local language at my own pace. If there's a self-service option there, which is potentially business from me and many small-minded Englanders like me, that wasn't going to be their business before. So actually, this idea that there is X amount of business, and actually that implementation of self-service takes away a specific order processing function for that X amount of business might not be the case. It might be Y amount of business as a result of that increased throughput.
We've definitely seen that with reduction in queues as well, where some of the larger sort of fast food restaurants, there was only a few 10, 12 years ago, and now with the rise in a lot of the sort of other challenger brands, customers, if they're on a retail park and you can see a big queue coming out the door there, but you can't there, you're more likely to go in, and that's just by diverting it. So there's lots of factors. Accessibility has been a huge one as well, and certainly having obviously implemented a lot of the new technologies over the past sort of 12 to 18 months as the EAA Act has become sort of mandated within Europe. So accessibility is a key thing, and that's another fact that if you can reduce the height of elements, if you can get screen readers for it, then it means that the kiosk is a much better tool for people who may have disabilities and would struggle to potentially speak to someone. So it does have many other sort of benefits as well.
Absolutely. You mentioned friction before, and the need to ideally reduce that, or in certain cases cause that. I guess one of those areas where friction comes in is age verification. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and what kind of things you see in there with age verification?
Yeah. So
yeah. Don't fight over it.
No, I mean, it's definitely been a topic that we've been requested or talked about from opportunities that we've got at the moment. There's lots of, I wouldn't say noise, but stories coming out at the moment about self-service adopting the technology. Certainly in Europe, I think the law is different, so that technology can be used to sell restricted age goods, so alcohol predominantly and things like that. I think there's definitely an opportunity to reduce friction or to help staff whereby they may feel anxiety around asking someone for ID. So if the self-service kiosk can almost do that pre-check and flag, and then member of staff would not feel the same, I suppose, awkwardness, pressure, whatever we call it, to actually ask someone. Because within retail, a lot of the staff are younger. You know what I mean? You don't necessarily want to challenge somebody. There's already a lot of abuse towards staff, so it kind of takes some of that away. So I think as the technology changes, I think it's not going to reduce the queue, so you can just check out and walk out. But there's developments that we're seeing now where actually you could potentially centrally manage. So it could be a member, because it needs to be a person has to sort of do that final verification. But if you could centralize that potentially, so you've got multiple stores, but you've almost got a help desk or some sort of call center where someone's doing that final check or then handing it over to a member of staff. So it's definitely an interesting one.
Centralized God who decides how long.
Yeah, exactly. Like VAR, but hopefully not as hopefully not as bad. Yeah, not as contentious. Yeah, because that'd be dreadful.
We're going over to the age verification referee.
Doing like playback to the screen and the videos. Turn around. But no, seriously, but it's definitely an interesting technology that, like with payment as well, what Jamie said, it's kind of one to watch, because if the legislation kind of moves on, to enable that, to reduce the friction, it's definitely a huge friction point if you're buying anything, whether it's, Monster drink or something at the till. It's always a pain, especially in these smaller sort of local retail stores where you just have to wait for a member of staff who's already got a queue and you just stood there wanting to buy a drink or something. So I think it'll be interesting to see how it develops.
Yeah.
I think in terms of some of the things you were saying from NRF, like the modularity of kiosks as well. So, where you might be reducing a payment device because you've got a solution where you're doing, chip on glass or pin on glass, whatever that may be. So you kind of descaling the kiosk, but equally there are opportunities to add cameras, add microphones.
Yeah.
That was something that we saw at Bartech.
Yeah.
So that you're almost kind of future-proofing the kiosks for some of those technologies. So if you are doing age verification via the camera, you're thinking about that maybe in advance of actually implementing the solution, but you're building it in as an additional component, an additional peripheral to the kiosk. So, I think everything we've kind of said so far, it shows that there's no single movement, that as the market has matured, there are more possibilities and more opportunities. And that's difficult to navigate sometimes, just thinking about what's the right solution for me and my requirements.
Yeah, and another interesting thing about that is how we're seeing that requirements have changed over the years, and you guys have been in this game for so long. I guess that with some of the deployments that you've got there so long standing, you must have people now that are coming onto their second and maybe the third generation of kiosks. What kind of changes are you seeing with that?
Yeah, I mean, in some instances, our first customer who we're still working with today, the Retaker, who were our first client back in sort of 2006, probably almost on the fourth generation now. So not an awful lot has changed with regard to the sort of underlying technology. We still have a touch screen, a thermal printer, a barcode scanner, an RFID reader. There's no kind of fundamental shift. The screens got bigger. Certainly the cost has come down. But kind of touching on what Jamie said before around about the size of the unit, the modularity of it. So it's not just kind of one size fits all. The screen could be portrait or landscape. There's desktop versions, put a leg on it, put it on a wall. So I think what we've seen And that's across other sectors as well, certainly within sort of fast food, where you have this huge screen with 32-inch typically. There's a smaller format, so it can go into more places. But then also complementary products, I think, as opposed to just having like one generation as a flagship, there's typically a kind of flagship product, and then almost like a kind of, not lower end, entry level solution, which is kind of complementing the range. And that's typically how we've been developing a lot of the solutions for our customers over the past few years. No major shift in sort of technology, more probably being more cost efficient, easier to ship for sure. So efficiencies around shipping and sort of volumetric weights and things like that are kind of the biggest changes that we've seen.
It's sort of fundamentally the same, but honed down to make it
a
bit more user friendly for both for your customers, their customers, and importantly for yourselves as well.
It's typically the software is the thing that's probably come on the most, isn't it, really, with regard to the sort of speed of the processes and what they can do on the software. That could be instant as well. They could be making software changes daily, pushing into the kiosk and tying into the different services and things. But the physical kiosk hasn't really changed much. The ergonomics are still the same. Fundamentally, people are still the same height and all those kind of things. So it's really just an evolution, looking at market trends, looking at design, looking at where these things are going and how they fit more harmonious within the sort of environments they go into. So that could come down to colour choice, material finish, those kind of things. But fundamentally, pretty similar. The core function.
I think as that market's matured, people are potentially looking for distinction and differentiation. So, where McDonald's did the heavy lifting in establishing this is what a self-service kiosk looks like, and then the number of inquiries that we've had over the years with people wanting that. Now, perhaps they're wanting something that is more unique to them. So they're wanting a differentiated product, just in terms of aesthetic. As you say, the form and the function is probably the same, but just the opportunity to personalize brand colors and just deliver something that's perhaps a bit more sympathetic to different shop environments.
Because I suppose at the end of the day, it's almost certainly a touch screen. There's probably a printer in there still. There's quite possibly a scanner. There's obviously going to be some sort of computer in there. There's some means of payment, but outside of that, there's probably cameras and other things in there. But the components, as Dean said, remain more or less the same. It's how those components are presented for use in the different establishments, right? What about the converse of that? Are there still strongholds where people say no, self-service is not suitable for our environment? You've got examples of that where they've been trying for 20 years to put self-service in there and they're just stubbornly refusing to move forward. Or it's just not the right technology for certain environments, I guess.
There are going to be certain environments. Obviously, I'd like to say that self-service can be anywhere, but that's just not the case. And there's lots of factors on it. There's some businesses that just really want to emphasise the sort of customer person-to-person contact. There's businesses that operationally can't necessarily offer self-service, whether that's operationally because they don't have barcoded labels or their product is front of house, so it's more of a grab and go style. So how would you then break that journey or sort of, bring self-service into it? But they can change operationally. If you look at Subway, we've been working with them for the last couple of years, and that was kind of almost like a top-down decision to change the operational flow of their business and make very, very big changes. But whereas if you looked at them a couple of years ago, you just say it's not going to work in this environment, but they've done that shift. So not to say it's not going to work anywhere, because I think there are environments where it doesn't necessarily need to be, right front center, but at certain peak times, it's there as I suppose, an option for the customer. So rather than have huge queues, you've kind of got, and you would mention the one about Starbucks and how they've implemented it in a similar way.
With the Starbucks, they were one of those operators who, for whom self-service was not right. And, they had quite an established position on that. But, they've got trials running at the moment and it is done in a way that is sympathetic to the environment. It builds loyalty really nicely into that journey. So you've got that recognition of who you are as a customer. I think even for those who perhaps didn't necessarily see the opportunity, they're beginning to understand that it can be implemented in a way that works for that brand. Tortilla's another brand, and kind of similar to Subway, where you've got the make line, if you like. So you start off with what protein are you having, whatever that looks like. You've got the opportunity to kind of customize. That was a key part of the experience. But data shows that by having kiosks, they could increase average order value so significantly that commercially that was a driver for more widespread rollout. And so, the onus there is on, well, what is the brand about? If it's not necessarily the make line, and same for Subway, let's look for different points of differentiation. So, it's ever evolving.
Yeah. I suppose related to this question, a bit of a cheeky question maybe, but have you seen environments where it's been done badly, or have you seen places where people have done self-service or tried to do self-service and they really just shouldn't have bothered in the first place?
Well, I mean, there's probably lots of examples, certainly early in our journey, where we weren't as close. So we sell directly through ISVs, and that was typically, and it's still a big part of our route to market, where you're not in contact with the end customer and you can't add the value around that customer experience and stuff. Change management is key. So doing a kiosk project and just dropping it into, whether it's a library or it's a hotel, and the staff aren't engaged, they don't understand the value in the product. So from day one, they think this kiosk is here to take my job. They're not consulted. They're not, So we've had some hotel trials where went to 30 locations. The staff were turning them off. They just did not see the value in them whatsoever. So obviously failed massively because there wasn't a change management in place, and we couldn't really work with them. Location, poor location. I think most of that's come down to us not having that direct engagement with the end customer. And I think certainly over the past 10 years where we're working more direct, and that's really helped. But we've got partners, ISVs, that bring us in. So, with the likes of Subway and a lot of these other brands where they've got a really, varying size stores. So some of them are huge service stations, things like that, but some of them are absolutely tiny, sort of shoebox style. So it's what's going to work in these locations, where we've got this, the customer journey does this. So I think we've learned a ton over the years of doing this and seeing it implemented badly, whether it's from the staff or it's from poor placements or, all of these factors, the wrong size kiosk, so no one can even see it, things like that. So tons of examples of poorly implemented kiosks, which has kind of made us understand the value in really working with the customers much more closely.
Yeah. Right. You mentioned there about partners and resellers. How important are they to Evoke? That's our business. We work exclusively with resellers. We know we've got quite a few that we work together with jointly. How do they fit into your ecosystem?
Hugely important. As Dean said, I think that was ISVs were a big important channel for us. Still are. And the stronger the relationships, the more that we get involved in those early stage conversations. So rather than being seen as a hardware supplier and, it's a more functional relationship, the best relationships are those where we're a true partner and we can add that value to the end customer early on. We know that they've got a whole range of solutions that they might be offering their customers, and where, again, we can add more value is where they're looking for something perhaps a little bit more distinctive. So it's not an off-the-shelf product, but they're able to offer customization to those customers, something that just looks a little bit different. And that could even be, for an independent operator and they've got, one or two kiosks, we can do customization at that level. So it's just a nice point of differentiation, for us, but also for that ISV, they're establishing a point of difference as well.
Absolutely. Good. So obviously we spent a lot of time today talking about the different trends, what's going on in self-service. What are you seeing in the market? Let's bring it back to Evoke and your business. What are you doing to ensure that you're keeping up with these trends, all these new things that are coming in and the development of the self-service industry? What's your business doing to respond to that?
I mean, what we're doing as a business strategically is broadening what we do, I suppose. So looking at obviously software development for the past 10 years, we've been building that platform. So it's the stickiness and being controlling more of the sort of product, I suppose, as we can, whether it's services, installations, support, maintenance. So broadening our sort of offering as a business, but also going to trade shows. As a business, we're passionate about what we do in technology. So by that nature, the team, the business are inherently inquisitive, whether that's digital signage technology, trade shows like NRF, ISC, understanding kind of technologies and what it's doing. That could be across lots of different sectors. That's another thing for us as well. We're not just kind of sector agnostic. We kind of bring the best of one sector to another. So something that's been doing hospitality might be a real appeal to somebody who's in gaming or something like that. So you've kind of got that cross-pollination across the different technologies. So I think it's just being inquisitive, being passionate, keeping an eye on kind of what's happening, what trends. It's not a really fast-moving industry, as I mentioned before, because things aren't shifting.
It's growing fast.
Yeah.
Like I said before, fundamentally, what people want is the same,
fundamentals are still there. But it's definitely the software for us has been a big one. Big investment in software, certainly over the past 3 years, where we were much more in control. And I think that software piece is the main interaction with the customer. So building on that, looking at kind of what's happening with AI, loyalty, personalization, all those kind of things, and building a really strong roadmap and listening to our customers, and that's the key thing for us.
Yeah, we're in a really fortunate position because we are biggest in the market in the UK. So, we've got great clients and conversations with them, but also, we have some really interesting conversations with prospects. And so, as much as we learn from trade shows and from partners, having those conversations with people who are, the key operators in the market, we learn a lot from, what the market is looking for. And we have those first-hand conversations, which is just huge, really invaluable.
Absolutely. Good stuff. So I'm going to, I hope you brought your crystal balls with you today. So I know people love this question. But I'm looking at, what do you think the market's going to look like 25 years from now? And we're going to write your predictions down.
Yeah.
If it doesn't come true, we'll be back to you. And,
the thing is,
Jamie will be back to you in 25 years.
With a lot of these technologies, I mean, the adoption, and certainly when we're talking about apps, AI, and that, but then even if you're looking at sort of back of house robotic cooking and all those kind of things where it's automating much more, is it going to come kind of full circle where we reach a peak and then there's almost like people want to speak to people? It's really hard to predict how society is going to change to these technologies. Certainly for the past 5 years, I think there's going to be a huge growth, and the growth across the areas that we mentioned before where we didn't see it, whether that's via business rates or all these kind of things, and there's big factors. But 25 years is an awful long time to understand what's going to happen if you listen to what Elon Musk and those guys. Society in general will shift. So in a roundabout way, I don't know. But I think
the thing is, if I ask that question, say, what do you think in 3 years' time? I think you'd have a fair start.
Yeah, you would, because we're almost planning 3 years ahead now with some of the projects that we're doing, and I think there's not going to be a huge shift. I think the underlying technology that's changing life in general, like AI and stuff, is having a massive impact and is going to continue to do so. But how that then plays out society is going to be hard. I really don't know.
I mean, if you kind of look at it the other way, like 25 years ago, self-service didn't exist in the way that we're talking about it today. So, if you'd have asked that question 25 years ago, could we have predicted where we are now? Probably not. So it's a really, really difficult thing. But I think that kind of full circle moment, it's almost, AI will enable us to do so many things, achieve those efficiencies, but there will come a point where society, people, community becomes ever more important in the face of that. So
people will still want to gather, whether it's a pub, a restaurant or something, or a retail space, those interactions and those sort of, there's obviously academic awareness and bringing people together or physically touching a product, I think is always going to be needed or wanted. So I think there's going to be physical spaces to do that. The way in which we transact in those spaces. It's hard to predict. If you look at some wearable technologies or even, embedded into your skin, the way in which we interact with those things, I think, is going to change dramatically.
You just walk into a self-service restaurant and
you could
think
just
what
think
you want.
it. Yeah, exactly.
And it interprets that.
You don't say anything, you don't touch your screen, they just go, great idea, coming right up.
Yeah, I know what you want.
It started as a real politician's answer and it moved to telekinesis.
Yeah.
I think it's a difficult question.
Telekinesis. Telepathy.
I think the reason it's a difficult question is because everything that's happened is to drive greater efficiency, but actually, to a certain extent, some of those organisations now are becoming so efficient because of the technology that's already available. I do think that maybe not so much as mind control, but certainly biometrics is a big part of that.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier about potentially moving away from someone physically checking an ID to having that registered by your appearance through an AI-enabled camera. Obviously, biometrics has already moved into the payment space to verify you are who you say you are when you're making a payment, rather than having to enter your PIN. So actually, how much further could that potentially go to streamline some of those bottlenecks in the checkout? Would we potentially get to a point where we could use our thumbprint to actually verify the payment without having to reach for our phone or physical card? So I think any change that happens will continue to drive efficiencies, but in terms of what we're already seeing, those efficiencies are already becoming apparent.
I think it's a question of people being comfortable with it, and then once people, and I think people are comfortable with it because whether it's your thumbprint or your face that's allowing you to pay on your own phone.
Yeah,
nobody's comfortable with your face, Richard.
That's true.
I think because you think it's safer than a code, so I think you're happier to do it because actually it means that you're less likely to be scammed or something as well as a factor.
Yeah, I think people being more comfortable with it will influence it because a lot of what's holding it back, as we've spoken a little bit about today, is the legislation and the government preventing this technology from becoming more than what it can be. The technology exists and has existed for quite a few years in terms of biometrics and how you use that. But obviously, you've got to be careful about how you implement that. So I think some of the technology that will transform things over the next 25 years already exists, and combined with AI, as you've mentioned,
it's like, how do you grant autonomy but still ensure in-premise security, which is a bit of a juggle, isn't it?
And I think mind control is the answer to that, James. I think mind control is the answer to everything, but I didn't say that.
You talk about legislation, but ultimately it's got to be what a customer is happy to do. And, so people talk about this kind of fine line between personalization, which is clever and intuitive and supportive. But at what point does it tip over to being creepy?
Yeah.
And so it's all got to come back to the customer and what is acceptable to them. And of course that's evolving all the time, but,
and people are different. So
exactly. So respect all the differences.
Yeah.
A very Orwellian detour we took at the end.
Definitely gone off on it.
Apparently 25 years in the future is 1984.
Episode of Tomorrow's World. So,
let's bring it back to the present, or at least the nearer, more imaginable future. Question to you all: what technology within this market is getting you excited? I'd say within this market, or actually even outside of this market, what's getting you excited in technology terms at the moment?
I think for me, we just touched on it before. It's just understanding where AI is going to take us. The speed at which it's growing, both in its capabilities but in its adoption is crazy, and we're starting to see it come over into self-service. Certainly with regard to sort of recommendations, it touches on that. At what point the fine balance between intrusion and sort of acceptance and all that. But I think for me it's just where we're going to start seeing that, whether it's smart menus, whether it's smart recommendations, all these kind of things, understanding the customer in front, what else can they be predicting that basically the human can't necessarily see. So I think it's, for me, I wouldn't necessarily say it's exciting because it's also quite scary. On outside of obviously sort of work-wise, but
Yeah, everything Dean said. AI, but how that there's so much talk about it, discussion around it, but practically, how is that going to benefit better customer experiences, better store operations?
Yeah, I think it's some of it is what you see already, and without even necessarily recognising that it is AI. It's just an increasingly personalised experience that that's happening. And I think it's when it happens and it's seamless to the point that you don't even recognise that it's happening. I think that's when it starts getting quite cool. And, obviously, there's a hell of a lot of work goes into the background behind that, but I think that there is a lot of talk about AI, and it's not all helpful. It's not all practical.
It's all
not
lumped in together.
It's not even very, very, very specific in a lot of cases. And I think that's something that I'd really like to see change about it. Is how do we get people to actually understand what it means for a restaurant, for a shop, for a technology reseller or a software provider that's that's doing this. So I think that's something that's I'm looking forward to seeing that change. So lots to as always a very interesting discussion when we get together. Maybe a little bit unusual that we've got together a discussion like this that's not been fueled by alcohol. So nice
it's a first, I think.
It might be a first. I don't want to say it was a first. I don't want to turn it into a alcoholic meeting. But it's good to always good to chat to you. Nice change for it, just to be powered by coffee and water. So and
this was vodka, by the
way. That one, it must have been. So thank you very much for joining us, Dean and Judith. It's been a pleasure as always talking. Thanks, Jamie, as well. And thank you if you've made it this far through the podcast. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for sticking with us. We'll be back really soon with another fascinating episode of the Ask Blue podcast. Thanks for listening.